I'm Ken Klippenstein with Breaking Points, the Intercept edition. We often hear about how much the CIA knows, but a recently leaked top-secret intelligence report reveals how much it doesn't know about one of Washington's closest allies, Israel. When I report on that document, let's get the photo up on the screen there. One particularly chilling passage jumped out at me at first. Quote, Netanyahu probably calculates Israel will need to strike Iran to deter its nuclear program, end quote. But after a closer look at the document, I realized that it wasn't even the worst part. Another portion of the document noted that, quote, CIA does not know Israel's near-term plans and intentions, end quote. You heard that correctly. The Central Intelligence Agency has no idea if or when Israel intends to bomb Iran. Now, that would seem like something that our premier spy agency should know. We certainly pay them enough to know those sort of things. What perhaps is even more stunning is that Israel, who the U.S. provides over $3 billion in military aid to each year, along with security commitments and all sorts of weapon sales, hasn't notified us of its plans. So not only are we on the hook to protect them if they start a war with Iran, which, by the way, experts recognize would quickly metastasize into a broader regional conflict, we aren't even being given a heads up on where or how or what might take place. The leaked document was produced by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. That's the U.S. government agency that oversees the entire suite of the intelligence community, from the CIA to the FBI. This document was one of an entire cache of classified records leaked to a Discord server earlier this year. That document makes an ominous reference to military exercises Israel is conducting and reveals they seem directed at Iran. Quoting from that document now, quote, on 20 February, Israel conducted a large-scale air exercise, the document states, going on to note that the exercise, quote, probably was intended to simulate a strike on Iran's nuclear program and possibly to demonstrate Jerusalem's resolve to act against Tehran, end quote. Now, that's the first public indication we've gotten that the exercise was designed to simulate a strike on Iran. To give you some context, back in January, just weeks before Israel's secret exercise referenced in that same intelligence report, both the U.S. and Israel conducted what the Defense Department touted as the largest joint military exercise in history. Called Juniper Oak, the exercise involved electronic attacks, suppression of enemy air defenses, reconnaissance, all the sorts of things that experts say both the U.S. and Israel would need to conduct a successful kinetic attack on Iran's nuclear program. The Biden administration itself has given increasingly clear signals that it would tolerate a unilateral strike by Israel on Iran's nuclear facilities. As National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said in a speech last month, quote, we have made clear to Iran that it can never be permitted to obtain a nuclear weapon, end quote. Now, that rhetoric reflects what military planners call strategic ambiguity. That's a policy of intentional uncertainty in order to deter an adversary, in this case, around how far the U.S. might actually go in stopping Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. But Sullivan went a step further even and said, as President Biden has repeatedly reaffirmed, he will take actions that are necessary to stand by the statement, including by recognizing Israel's freedom of action. Sullivan's statement represents the strongest signal yet that the administration would not oppose unilateral action by Israel. The rhetoric has also been echoed by other administration officials. In February, for example, the U.S. ambassador to Israel said that, quote, Israel can and should do whatever they need to deal with Iran, and we've got their back. Paul Pillar, a retired national intelligence officer for the Near East, told me in an interview commenting on Sullivan's statement, quote, I believe the administration is playing with fire with this kind of rhetoric and with the joint military planning. That is the planning I mentioned earlier. So to be clear, if Iran gets a nuclear weapon, that's going to touch off a dangerous arms race, including by Gulf nations like Saudi Arabia have made clear that they would want their own weapon. So there's no question that's bad. But there's also no evidence that Iran is actually pursuing that. So, for example, as the Pentagon's most recent nuclear posture review plainly states, quote, Iran does not today possess a nuclear weapon, and we currently believe it is not pursuing one. More recently, CIA Director William Burns reiterated that point in his interview with CBS in February. He said, quote, to the best of our knowledge, we don't believe the supreme leader in Iran has yet made a decision to resume the weaponization program that we judge that they suspended or stopped at the end of 2003, end quote. Compare that with the kind of stuff you hear from the think tanks, from mainstream media. That's a very different tone than the alarmist rhetoric that the American people have been subjected to on the Iranian threat, and something that I think is worth paying attention to and considering. Once again, I'm Ken Klippenstein. Thanks so much for joining me.